Hey guys, how are you? I'm in Aix-en-Provence actually, and today I want to do a video about something I've been asked about a lot lately, which is assistance work. So, as usual, I'm not going to give you a what, I'm going to give you a why or the how. So, what is assistance work for, right? What is the why on that one? So, assistance work is designed to help movement patterns. We have four: the pull, the push, the squat, and the hinge. The point of the assistance work is to assist you in performing movement patterns better, right? Okay, so how do we do that? There are a few principal concepts we need to talk about to define which assistance work is better for you. The first one is movement patterns, push, pull, squat, hinge, go through torque, right? I talk about it all the time. You've seen my other videos. So the pull is external torque, push is internal torque, squat is external torque on the way up, hinge is internal torque, right? So in order to make those movement patterns more efficient, we need to work on the torque. So the first point of assistance work is that it should help you work on the torque properly for the movement pattern, which means if I'm working on my pull, I should work on external torque. If I'm working on my push, I should work internal torque, right? And so that sounds obvious, but actually there's a few problems. For example, if you're working on your snatch, right, you're going to do assistance work to help your snatch. Let's say the catching part of the snatch, when you're standing up with it, your position overhead, right, the stabilization of your overhead positioning, right? Okay, so that's a push. That means I should work internal torque better. So I've seen people giving you supinated pull-ups as an assistance work for holding the snatch overhead correctly. Okay, but here's a problem. By the way, I love supinated pull-ups. They should be done, but for different reasons that I'm going to explain after. But supinated pull-ups should not be done in the idea of helping you with your overhead positioning, for example, on the snatch, because that's a push. Holding a bar overhead is a push. A supinated pull-up is a pull. So what am I going to end up doing if I do supinated pull-ups? I go toward the movement pattern that is a pull. I go external torque, right? Especially with supinated, it helps you externally torque better, which is great, but not for a push. And it's going to work the long head of my bicep. So long head of my bicep in external torque for a pull pattern does not equal better stabilization on the snatch. Because what do I need for stabilizing better? I need better internal torque. So what does that mean? I mean short head of the bicep into the pec. So an exercise, an assistance exercise that is correct to help the snatch overhead would be one that allows me to engage the short head of the bicep toward internal torque. So exactly the opposite of a supinated pull-up. So I'm not saying you should not do supinated pull-ups. I think they're awesome, but that is not the why you're going to use it. The why, in order to help the positioning overhead on any type of press, is toward internal torque and short head of the bicep, right? So what would be good exercises for this? For example, the overhead yoke carry that I like so much, because it's impossible to do an overhead yoke carry while doing external torque, right? Going toward the long head of the bicep. You cannot do it. The second you're trying to control a yoke overhead, you're going to see that you have to create internal torque, short head of the bicep work. That is a very good assistance work for overhead positioning. If I want short head of the bicep internal torque, I can do bicep openers as well. Bicep curls in a way, but in the sense of working toward internal torque. This is why I created the opener, because it allows me to work that short head of the bicep, to work that internal torque, and that in turn will help me with the overhead positioning. So again, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. If you're going to do an assistance work, you have to understand that you're going after a movement pattern and a certain kind of torque to help into that movement pattern. So that brings me back to the bicep opener, the bicep curls. They can be an interesting exercise, but you have to understand, if you do bicep curls toward external torque, like doing the movement like this, you are working the long head of the bicep, you are helping your pull, not your push. So if you want to help your pull, yes, you should do, for example, something like a bicep curl with external torque, or you should do something like supinated pull-ups that will help your push, but not your pull. So it's very important to understand that the assistance work is done to better movement pattern, and that you have to work through the correct torque in order to do that. So if I look, for example, at how to help a sprinter, when a sprint is a pure hinge. So what do I want? I want to work toward internal torque, that medial head, inside head of the hammy. That's the important one, right? If I work, let's say, a leg curl at the gym, what do? When I do the leg curl, most people will have their feet turning out slightly. So they will work toward external torque. They will work the lateral head of the hammy, the outside head. So what are they going to do? They're going to help. External torque is a squat. They're going to help their squat pattern, not their hinging pattern. So therefore, they're not heading their sprint. What they're doing is developing the hammy, a part of the hammy, but that is not the one they're going to need to hinge more efficiently. So they can do all the leg curls in the world. They're going to end up, when they sprint, pulling that medial head because it was never prepared for a hinge. That is the same thing if you work, let's say, on a stiff leg deadlift to help on your hinge, but you create torque externally. You're going to go toward that lateral head, the outside head of the hammy, like I'm sure you feel. You're going to lock your SI joint into place, which means you're going to end up doing a flexion extension of the spine. You are never going to work on your hinge that way. Therefore, you are never going to prepare the medial head of the hammy. That means no matter how much basically stiff leg deadlift you do and leg curls you do, you are not necessarily preparing yourself for the sprint. You can only do that if you understand internal torque and working toward the medial head. So if you do a stiff leg correctly toward the medial head of the hamstrings by creating internal torque, then you are preparing yourself for the sprint. Then you are doing assistance work for it. But so you have to understand, it's not the exercise. It's not what you do. It's how you do it that matters. Right, so you have to understand the concept of movement patterns and torque first in order to apply assistance work correctly. So you can see that for, like I was saying, the supinated pull-up, how to do bicep curls correctly, how to do any exercise, the leg curls, all that thing. You have to understand which movement pattern you're trying to help and which torque you're trying to create, right? So after that comes the idea of how much work should I do, because a lot of people do too much, not enough. That has to do with homeostasis and hormesis. Hormesis means favorable response to stress. Right? So you have to do enough work, volume or intensity in order to elicit a response. But if you do too much of it, now you're going to go into the problem of homeostasis, which is balance, where the body is going to try, because you did too much, the body is going to try to bring you back in the middle. And that's when you're going to feel exhausted or something like that, because the body is having a reaction to you doing too much work. So you always have to be conscious of that. The concept of critical mass is, I want homeostasis, of course, but not past the point of imbalance into energy systems. So the idea is, in order to be efficient with all this, is always to balance everything. You have to balance the types of movement that you do, a load, a carry, or a hold, right? You have to balance all the planes of movement, all the energy systems, and all the types of contraction. So assistance work should be done with this in mind, of balancing, having all the movement patterns correctly with the correct torque, balancing the type of movement that you do, a hold, a carry, or load, should be done in all planes of movement, should be done throughout energy systems, and all types of contraction, right? So in a sense, the template that I use for Strongfit is part of my assistance work, right? Anything that is not the main lift or your main sport, I would say, goes toward assistance work. So you have to balance all this. And by the way, balancing the all planes of movement for CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting is all important, because there is no work in the frontal plane, no work in a transversal rotation enough. So that has to include it. And that's why, going back to the supinated pull-ups, I think supinated pull-ups are great because they make you work supinated, obviously, right? And that is something we never work with CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting, because by grabbing the bar, we're always pronated. So that means working supinated helps working on that external torque. It's great. Love that exercise. I think everybody should do it, especially with a wide grip. But understand that it will not help you with your overhead stabilization, because I saw that as a main assistance work. No, that helps your pull, not your push, right? So that's the thing with assistance work. It has to help you perform the movement pattern correctly with the correct torque. That's number one. And after that, you have to balance the box of types of movement, low, carry, and hold, all the planes of movement and axis. You have to go energy systems, and you have to go types of contraction, eccentric, concentric, and isometric. So that's, by the way, why I created the opener. So assistance work is not what you do, it's how you do it. The all important part is to understand why you do assistance work and how to do them. After that, it doesn't matter which exercise you do, it only matters how you do them. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And any other questions, please put it in the comments, and then I'll go through each exercise if you need to. Okay, thank you guys.